Hi, I got hold of the MPG 50 from RETROAKTIV, which is a controller surface for the Alpha Juno 2. I say it's a controller surface, it's an awful lot more, but I do love my Alpha Juno. I bought it back in the 80s. I'd saved up for 3 years for it. I went to a shop, I wanted the 106. The guy said, no, you want to get the Juno 2, it's much better and cheaper, and it was the worst synth I could possibly have bought when I didn't really know how to program a synth, because if you've ever seen one of these, you pick your parameters using this alpha dial. Just go into parameter select, find the parameter, click the value, change the value, and then go to the next parameter. And you do that over and over, you access one parameter at a time. And because the alpha dial doesn't click or anything, doesn't give any feedback, you're always overshooting where you want to go, trying to find the parameters you need. It's absolutely useless. But there was the PG300. The PG300, there was about the same price as the synth, and the synth dropped in value, and the PG300 didn't, and it didn't add anything extra, so I never bought a hardware controller. And then we got loads and loads of software controllers that came out. So this came out of the attic, and I started using software controllers, but actually didn't use them that much because you're still doing this with an iPad or messing around with your mouse. So I've not invested in a control surface as of yet. And then this little beauty came along, and not only is it a hardware controller, but it adds some really nice features which take it well beyond being just a box of knobs. Firstly, you can control 2 different units with it. For press main, we can see we're on unit 1, unit 2, unit 1 and 2. So you can have a massive 12 oscillator Juno, or you can have 2 independent patches on 2 Junos. Also, it can transmit MIDI CC. It can translate the SysX to MIDI CC, which means that you can use it as a control surface as well for anything you want. I've been using this to control a soft synth, which I'll show in a minute. So we've got assignable controllers. We can see controller A and controller B. Here we've also got an expression pedal input, plus you can use MIDI CC, and that means as it can translate CC, you can use MIDI modulators in your DAW and then use them to increase the number of envelopes or LFOs or whatever you want inside your synth. Not just this synth, but any synth. On top of that, we've got patch loading and saving abilities. So we can go there, we can go load, or we can store. We can store patches. We've got 4 banks in this, but I think you can expand it up to 8 or 12 banks. I'm not quite sure. I'd have to double check on the manual again there. Then we can store the whole setup, which is all the MIDI setup and everything else. Any assigned settings you've programmed, and the CC maps as well. As I say, you can use this to control whatever you like. So any soft synth or any keyboard that'll take, or any synth that'll take CC. So now we know what it is. Let's just take a quick look at the hardware. Comes in this nice metal box, almost the same colour as the Juno. It's got the similar sort of finish to all those 80s Roland classics. We've got these nice sliders that offer a fair bit of resistance. The throw is about the same as the Juno 106 and my Jupiter 6. It may even be a bit longer, but it's definitely not less. I think it's probably identical. And then we've got this little screen in the center. I did wonder what the screen was for when I first saw this, but all those different setups and all the loading, saving, the MIDI setups and that, all done via the screen. And also it shows you some nice feedback. So we've got the oscillator wave shapes and the envelopes on there as well. So that's all quite handy. And you can see the size of it here. It's a little bit big to actually sit on the Juno itself. If I try and just put it up there, it's sort of would maybe just about fit, but they do offer I think it's $85 for a fitting that sits in these 2 holes in the Juno there for the music stand that sits in there, so it'll just sort of sit nicely on your Juno like that. But I've not got that because I'm going to use this from the other side of the studio and access the Juno with a keyboard that's actually got aftertouch, and all the keys are working on this. All the keys aren't working. Well, some are. So yeah, I've got 4 or 5 keys on this that don't work. So take this to the other side of the studio and I can access absolutely everything that I can access from the Juno with the box, because I've programmed in, or I've dumped in all the programs that I've got in this into this. So I can load everything in this. And being able to access absolutely everything from the MPG 50 means I don't need the hardware accessible at all, which means I can stuff it under a sofa or in a corner in the studio, and it's freed up space on my rack. So it's actually given me extra functionality and freed up space in the studio, which is massively handy. Okay, then should we start by taking a look at sort of the more basic functions before digging in a little bit deeper? So let's just take a look at the surface, shall we? So access to all the parameters, if I just play something. Let's just put a bit more of a reasonable tone on. Let's put on something like that. And you can see as I do that, the parameter values are showing, as are the waveforms. Let's turn the sub off. Do you know, it's such a joy to be able to do that on a Juno 2. And what you do notice as soon as you start playing with this is that the parameters that have got distinct values, things like the oscillator shape or the envelope selection, are all on sliders as well. They're not on switches, which might seem a bit odd, but actually because you got the feedback from the screen, you know exactly what you've chosen. There's no debating whether you are between two of the wave shapes. It shows you here. Let's add a little bit of a PWM. Honestly, it's just such a joy to have the knobs in front of me. I should really have bought a PG 300 like in the 90s, but there you go. So I'm doing what you might expect, you know, I'm changing things with the controllers, but there's little extra things you can do in here. We can put this into manual mode, press Shift and Enter. Shift is when you push this main knob down. So now what you hear, what you see is what you get, I should say. So if we just load something else, let's make that a bit more crazy, shall we? Loading a sound. And then go back to manual mode. I should be back to that crazy sound. Another nice little touch here is that if you press Shift while you slide a knob, it will show you the parameter it's set on. So Shift and cut off. It was on 13. It's not changing the value, it's just letting you know what the value was. So now we can change it. Shift and resonance. It was at 60. It's not moving at all. And now it is. Just a really handy way of being able to see what your sound is actually doing. Okay, what else have we got? We can go to mono, chord or poly mode, pressing Shift and the glide button. So chord mode, choosing the chord mode on the Juno 2. Or poly mode. So we've got access to all synth engine parameters. The only one I had difficulty finding was the range, and it's here with the octave plus and octave minus, shift up and down. So as a control surface, it does everything you expect, everything you need. I was surprised they could do the chord memory actually. I didn't think that was possible over MIDI. I've not been able to do it on any of the apps I've used, so that's pretty cool as well. So everything you want, everything you need, plus extras. So let's go and look at the assignable controllers, shall we? The assign mode is really cool because it effectively creates a mini mod matrix. If we go into it, I'll just quickly show how to set the assign modes up, or the assign controllers. Got assign A, assign B, expression pedal, aftertouch, CC assign 1, 2 and 3. And that means you can assign a CC to control anything so that you can modulate stuff via your DAW, and I'll show all that in a second. But let's just set one up. I've got a couple set up in here already. And that's modulating the cutoff, the LFO and the LFO amount to the cutoff. Let's just double check that. So destination 1 is the low pass cutoff, destination 2 is the LFO rate, and destination 3 is the VCF LFO amount. If I just show you quickly, so just increasing the LFO rate, not quite as dramatic as. And so don't mess them up, let's just try creating another one. Go to the expression pedal. So if I want the LFO rate, for example, hold shift down, wiggle the LFO rate, we've got the minimum and the maximum. And if we slide it down, we get an inversion of that, so that the higher you push the controller, the lower the value. And you can change that from invert to normal and back again manually if you get yourself confused about what you do with your sliders. But if we try that again, so the starting point is here, you can move it up to a maximum, then move it to a more minimum, then to a higher maximum, or start again and have it inverted. So it's really easy, really intuitive and really flexible, and it allows you to do stuff like I did in the little intro track, but you can automate that as well. We've got MIDI CC maps on this, so let's quickly show you the MIDI CC maps. We go into MIDI, page 2, and we've got the CC map, and if I start moving any of the sliders, you can see the cutoff's on 27, the resonance is on 28. In other words, we can assign any CC to any of the sliders and control whatever we like with it. I've just set this up in the DAW. And just for fun, I'm using Redominator, which is the Juno 2 emulation from Audio Realism. And if I move the cutoff, we're moving the cutoff on the soft synth. But what this also means is that I can set up one of the controllers for a macro and then record it with this and then play back the macro. So I'm playing back with one tweak up to 5 different parameters. So here we've got MIDI CC32 that I've recorded in with a slider. So that's recording that macro. So that macro is a bit like a MIDI matrix, and this is all stuff that you couldn't do on the Juno 2 without the MPG 50. Another nice little additional bit of functionality that I mentioned earlier was using the modulation capabilities of your DAW to bring extra functionality to the synth. So let's take a quick look at that. Here we've got Logic's modulator, and I've got this sending out to MIDI channel 22, which is the oscillator envelope amount on the MPG. So this will change the pitch of the oscillator. If I play a note, we can change the amount of it with this knob here, or the offset. So then I thought, well, let's try something else. I thought try the LFO rate. So the LFO rate on this is MIDI CC35, but Logic won't send out MIDI CC35 for whatever reason. Don't know what that is. So we can still use the LFO rate by using the assign, one of the MIDI assign. So let's say MIDI assign 18, just take a random one, put MIDI assign 18 to the LFO rate. Let's try that. So MIDI assign 2, CC, and hopefully 18 isn't assigned to something else and all hell's going to break loose, but let's see. Okay, and we'll set that to the LFO rate. Okay, 0 to maximum. So if we go to this, 18, set to the sub level on this already. So we can see there that the sub level's changing. So let's pick one that's not already assigned on the MPG. Let's go for this one down here, 119. So if we go back up to CC22, 119. Yes, that's all pretty cool. It means there's all sorts of modulation things that you can do on the Juno or on anything. And I got the MPG 50. I'm quite impressed by that. Another really nice little touch on this is the patch generator. This patch generator is quite cool. You can have a random patch. Let's just generate one. So it's generating a tone. This can be anything. We can see here all the different parameters that you can change, or all the different categories of parameter, I should say. But let's see what we got. So we've got something, but it's a little bit random. But what's really nice on this is that we can go to bass. Let's do all bass or no release bass or res bass. Let's try res bass. So that's really quite intelligent, isn't it? Let's try, what else have we got in here? Or dance, where was that? Hopefully we're going to get some sort of Hoover thing. And we do. Oh, that's cool, isn't it? Okay, let's try a piano. Now this makes really dodgy piano sounds. Try another. I'm using that tune because it was originally done on one of these. Let's try some strings. Oops. Solo strings or ensemble strings. Well, I really like that. It's really clever, isn't it? I've not come across a patch generator that good before on a synth. I'm sure they've got them on lots of soft synths and stuff, but yeah. A nice little touch that. Let's try another one. Polysynth. Okay, I think I've pretty much covered the basics. Let's maybe just take a look at patch load and save and stuff like that. So to load a patch, press that. Click on chorus on and off, and then we can either load or store, and we can go to the patches, the assigned, CC maps, or the whole setup. I think I showed that in the intro. And then if we go to shift and store, we go straight to store. So shift and load. And I've already loaded in the user banks that I've got, or the user bank I've got in this. So if we go to shift and load, patch, enter, here we go. And actually what I've got on the synth is exactly the same. So you get the idea. Remember on the main screen, if we go left, we can load the patches from the synth. So you'd never need to have the synth right in front of you. As I said, I don't plan on having this anywhere accessible, so I can free up a bit of space. But let's have a look then at navigating through these menus. So press main to get to the main control page. Press it again to get to unit 2. It's effectively like you've got 2 of these, so you've got 2 units that you could be controlling, or you can have both controlled at the same time. Then we go to right and we get to the patch setup that you've got within the MKS 50 or the Juno. On the Juno it's really basic, you've just got poly mode or the bend amount. So poly mode actually to chord, change the bend amount. back to main, and then left will load in the patches again. In the MIDI menu, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 separate pages, and this is where you set up all your MIDI setups, obviously. Unit 2 is set up for the user CC, and that's how come I was controlling the software using this. We could have that as a MKS50 or a Juno. You've got the MIDI ports and channels, etc, etc. And down here you saw earlier, which is where I was assigning the MIDI CCs, assigning the CCs at the bottom. Next page. We've got a chord mode on the actual unit itself, and you can set that using these knobs here or using a keyboard. Just play it as you would on the Juno. Press shift, press some notes, and then finally we get to the receive the Juno bank or to send the bank to or from the synth itself. Well, I think that covers just about everything. There may be the odd little bit here I've missed, but the main functions of this, we've got the fact that it's a controller, it controls 2, you can control with MIDI CC, you can assign macros to it, you can save patches, you can use it in manual mode. I think I've covered everything, I hope I have. But I've been really enjoying playing with this, as you might be able to tell over the past few days, and really playing with exactly what you can do with it. And that's why I was trying with the assign modes via Logic and using the modulators in Logic as well. So it's just brought a whole new life to the synth, which is brilliant. So unlike most control services, it does actually bring something new. It doesn't just control the parameters, which is why I've got hold of this one, and I've never got one before in the 30 years since I had this, because I'm too tight and I don't want to be spending money on something that doesn't add any functionality beside the knobs, I suppose. But yeah, really, really, really like it. The $449, so they're not a cheap option, but they are an excellent option from my perspective. I really like it. I'd rather have this than something that was just knobs, as I think you've probably guessed through what I've been saying over the past half hour or so. So I hope that was of some use to somebody somewhere. If it was, do think about subscribing. It does help the channel, and also maybe pop over to my Patreon page and support me over there as well. And if you are thinking of buying some new bits of kit, maybe even go to Perfect Circuit Audio if you're in the States, because I'll get a little dropsy and you'll get free shipping, which is nice all round. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time.